Are you sometimes confused when it comes to laying out your designs? Well, let's look at process 1 first. This first process is called the hierarchy approach. For this process to work properly, you need to have your design elements in mind for the project, or even perhaps given to you by the client already. By design assets, I mean the imagery, the text content, and so on, just the things that go onto your design. You then need to break your design elements down into 3 crucial groups. Group 1 is the primary element group. Then group 2 is the secondary element group. And the last one is the tertiary group. In this first group, we need to put in the elements we deem to be most important on the design itself. With the example of a music event poster design, we can say the event name and the relevant images go in this group as being most important. In the second group, we can add in the artist names, the people who are going to be playing at the music event, and also the dates of the event itself. And then the third group can contain the website URLs, social media account names, and so on. These are just the little details that don't actually draw in the viewer initially, but are going to be read and looked at last. So when you have your 3 groups ready, it's then time to determine how we're going to use them in terms of hierarchy. Now we could start by aiming for hierarchy of size, and as you move through the different groups, make the less important details smaller on your design. We can also use color and highlight the most important aspects with brighter, bolder colors. Or we could do something like use hierarchy of texture, where some elements are flat and bold to stand out, and less important details are faded with gradients of textures or just kind of fade effects. If you start your design by adding design elements into these 3 groups, it then becomes easier to lay them out on your design, especially if you use hierarchy of size first and foremost. Here's a quick bonus tip for this approach. So if you use the hierarchy method for your layout, in your project folder on your computer, create 3 different folders that are hierarchy based, and then put relevant elements into each folder, and this will help you be more optimized for your workflow and organization. Now, if you've seen just a handful of my videos, you'll understand how I teach that graphic design should be learned from the ground up. You must master the basics and the fundamentals of graphic design so you can then excel to the higher teachings and theories effectively. Now, I teach in this way because simply, well, it works. It's also how things are done over on Brilliant, which is a wholly unique learning platform like no other. Now, Brilliant is where you learn by doing, and that's with thousands of interactive lessons in math, data analysis, programming, AI, and more. And also, I do talk about how graphic designers essentially are problem solvers when you think about it. And well, with Brilliant, they help build your critical thinking skills through problem solving, not memorizing. So while you're building real knowledge on specific topics, you'll also become a better thinker in the process. Each lesson on Brilliant is filled with hands-on problem solving that let you play with concepts. This is a method proven to be 6 times more effective than just watching lecture-type videos. Plus, all content on Brilliant is crafted by award-winning teams of teachers, researchers, and professionals from MIT, Caltech, Duke, Microsoft, Google, and more. There are quite a few subjects to cover and learn on Brilliant, but coming from a design background, something I think is quite important is coding, something especially important for the future. And with Brilliant, you can learn to build programs right in your browser with built-in drag and drop editors. You can become fluent in essential coding concepts from loops and variables to nesting and conditionals. To try everything that Brilliant has to offer for a 30-day free trial, head over to brilliant.org/Satori Graphics, or you can just click the link in the description box below. You'll also get 20% off the premium annual plan for Brilliant, so do make sure to check out the link in the description box below. The next layout approach is probably my favorite, and it works on almost any design project you can think of. This is the modular layout process. With this approach, we aim to make life a whole lot easier for ourselves, and here's exactly how. A module is a section of a grid, often square or rectangle. The first step is to determine what shape modules you want to work with. Do you want a grid made up of squares, rectangles, or perhaps even circles? It will depend on the dimensions and the style of your project. The next step is really important. You need to ask yourself, how many modules do I need? This is important because it can determine how busy or not busy your design becomes. If we had a double-page brochure design that was for a vacation company, each page being a square dimension, I would probably make 4 large modules in each page, 2 up and 2 down, and then split each module into 4 smaller modules inside of that. But this is just an example, of course. So here's the first pro tip for the module grid layout approach. You can also draw in buffer lines, maybe a fraction apart from the lines originally, and this can create micro white space, which we'll look at later. When you have your modules in place, you can now begin to allocate your design elements into the modules. If an element is large and important, it might take up 1 or 2 large modules. But then if an element is smaller and less important, it might occupy 1 or 2 of the smaller inner modules. The buffer lines really do help when it comes to helping your text and other elements not touch each other. In doing so, we have micro white space between them, and this helps keep a visually cohesive and professional design. And it's especially helpful for laying out bodies of text on your designs. And I've got another pro tip for this layout approach as well. When you've made the module grid, either group all of the lines together or collapse them down onto one layer, and you can then just hide and unhide it throughout your design process. And this will help you to see how the design is going and how it looks without having the grid lines in place. Process number 3 is the asymmetrical layout process. Now for this approach to work on a layout design, we need to establish a focal point, but before that, we need to set some goals. We can use the example of a landing page design to show this method and how it works, but of course, this applies to most layout design projects. So the goal for this landing page might be to show off and raise awareness of a new tech gadget, which then leads to potential clicks and sales on the product. The very first thing to do is to create a focal point, ideally a little off center or just completely off to one side of your layout. For our focal point here, we can simply use the product gadget itself. Then we'll begin to add in other elements in harmony, yet in contrast to the focal point on the other side, adjacent to the focal point. Now you can think of this layout as having a large area made up of just 1 or 2 elements. Then that is mirrored against the other area where we have a collection of numerous smaller objects. In this second area, we can have our CTAs and text content, and we can make the CTA stand out with contrast and color and so on. A bonus tip to keep in mind for this approach is to focus on contrast and use white space to create a distinction between the 2 areas. So there are some quick ways to establish a layout on your design, 3 different approaches actually, and I hope they work out for you, and if they do, let me know in a comment down below. If you want to learn more about layout design, just click the video on screen, but until next time guys, design your future today. Peace.